Mental models are a critical tool for effective problem-solving and decision-making. They are essentially a set of cognitive frameworks or maps that individuals use to understand, interpret, and navigate the world around them. In today's video, we will tell you everything about them. 12. What are mental models? Mental models are how we understand the world. Not only do they shape what we think and how we understand, but they shape the connections and opportunities that we see. Mental models are how we simplify complexity, why we consider some things more relevant than others, and how we reason. A mental model is simply a representation of how something works. We cannot keep all of the details of the world in our brains, so we use models to simplify the complex into understandable and organizable chunks. Mental models help you understand life. For example, supply and demand is a mental model that helps you understand how the economy works. Game theory is a mental model that helps you understand how relationships and trust work. Entropy is a mental model that helps you understand how disorder and decay work. Mental models also guide your perception and behavior. They are the thinking tools that you use to understand life, make decisions, and solve problems. Learning a new mental model gives you a new way to see the world. Like Richard Feynman, learning a new math technique. Mental models are imperfect but useful. There is no single mental model from physics or engineering, for example, that provides a flawless explanation of the entire universe. But the best mental models from those disciplines have allowed us to build bridges and roads, develop new technologies, and even travel to outer space. As historian Yuval Noah Harari puts it, scientists generally agree that no theory is 100% correct. Thus, the real test of knowledge is not truth, but utility. The best mental models are the ideas with the most utility. They are broadly useful in daily life. Understanding these concepts will help you make wiser choices and take better actions. This is why developing a broad base of mental models is critical for anyone interested in thinking clearly, rationally, and effectively. 11. How to use mental models. If all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. A common misconception is that mental models should be dutifully practiced and applied in order to improve your mental performance. There are actually many mental models which you should work hard to avoid. For example, having an illusion of control can be particularly dangerous in some situations. In order to grow as a human being, you need to be able to identify mental models, whether you are using them or the person you're talking to is. Ideally, you need to make it a conscious choice to use them or not, instead of falling prey to the automatic thinking our brain loves so dearly. To break a mental model is harder than splitting the atom. Albert Einstein. So how can you challenge your mental models, identify them in others, and use them in a way that is actually effective and beneficial? Here are a few tips you can apply to master mental models rather than being enslaved by them. Be aware of your thinking by asking yourself provoking questions. Gather information to challenge your thinking with actual facts. Inquire into other people's thinking and challenge their views. Resist jumping to conclusions and suspend your assumptions. Look for recurring thought patterns and unlearn them. A tool is only as good as its user. Only once you're aware of your mental models, you can use them effectively to achieve your goals. Let's take a look at some core mental models. 10. The map is not the territory. The map of reality is not reality. Even the best maps are imperfect. That's because they are reductions of what they represent. If a map were to represent the territory with perfect fidelity, it would no longer be a reduction, and thus would no longer be useful to us. A map can also be a snapshot of a point in time, representing something that no longer exists. This is important to keep in mind as we think through problems and make better decisions. 9. Circle of competence. When ego and not competence drive what we undertake, we have blind spots. If you know what you understand, you know where you have an edge over others. When you are honest about where your knowledge is lacking, you know where you are vulnerable and where you can improve. Understanding your circle of competence improves decision-making and outcomes. 8. First principles thinking. First principles thinking is one of the best ways to reverse engineer complicated situations and unleash creative possibility. Sometimes called reasoning from first principles, It's a tool to help clarify complicated problems by separating the underlying ideas or facts from any assumptions based on them. What remains are the essentials. If you know the first principles of something, you can build the rest of your knowledge around them to produce something new. 7. Thought experiment. Thought experiments can be defined as devices of the imagination used to investigate the nature of things. Many disciplines, such as philosophy and physics, make use of thought experiments to examine what can be known. In doing so, they can open up new avenues for inquiry and exploration. Thought experiments are powerful because they help us learn from our mistakes and avoid future ones. They let us take on the impossible, evaluate the potential consequences of our actions, and re-examine history to make better decisions. They can help us both figure out what we really want and the best way to get there. 6. Second-order thinking. Almost everyone can anticipate the immediate results of their actions. This type of first-order thinking is easy and safe, but it's also a way to ensure you get the same results that everyone else gets. Second-order thinking is thinking farther ahead and thinking holistically. It requires us to not only consider our actions and their immediate consequences, but the subsequent effects of those actions as well. Failing to consider the second and third order effects can unleash disaster. 5. Probabilistic thinking. Probabilistic thinking is essentially trying to estimate, using some tools of math and logic, the likelihood of any specific outcome coming to pass. It is one of the best tools we have to improve the accuracy of our decisions. In a world where each moment is determined by an infinitely complex set of factors, probabilistic thinking helps us identify the most likely outcomes. When we know these, our decisions can be more precise and effective. 4. Inversion. Inversion is a powerful tool to improve your thinking because it helps you identify and remove obstacles to success. The root of inversion is invert, which means to upend or turn upside down. As a thinking tool, it means approaching a situation from the opposite end of the natural starting point. Most of us tend to think one way about a problem, forward. Inversion allows us to flip the problem around and think backward. Sometimes it's good to start at the beginning, but it can be more useful to start at the end. 3. Occam's razor. Simpler explanations are more likely to be true than complicated ones. This is the essence of Occam's razor, a classic principle of logic and problem solving. Instead of wasting your time trying to disprove complex scenarios, you can make decisions more confidently by basing them on the explanation that has the fewest moving parts. 2. Hanlon's razor. Hard to trace in its origin, Hanlon's razor states that we should not attribute to malice that which is more easily explained by stupidity. In a complex world, using this model helps us avoid paranoia and ideology. By not generally assuming that bad results are the fault of a bad actor, we look for options instead of missing opportunities. This model reminds us that people do make mistakes. It demands that we ask if there is another reasonable explanation for the events that have occurred. The explanation most likely to be right is the one that contains the least amount of intent. 1. How to build your own mental models. In a fast-moving environment, mental models can be extremely useful to help you think fast and make decisions. After all, they're great at giving you rules of thumb so you can, if done well, predict likely outcomes or behaviors. Observe people. One great way to develop your own mental models is to find inspiration in people. When you read a biography, ask yourself, why did they make this decision? What were they thinking? What mental models did they use? It doesn't have to be famous entrepreneurs or creatives. We all have a friend or a colleague whose work we admire. When you see them make a specific choice in a complex situation, ask them how they came to that decision. Take note of nature. Nature follows many rules that can apply to human decision-making. For example, the tendency to minimize our energy output can be observed in many natural conditions, and incentives are a key driver in all creatures' behavior. Ask for feedback. Ask a friend or a colleague to observe how you act and to help you identify behaviors that may not be obvious to you. This can be an incredibly uncomfortable but mind-expanding exercise. Don't limit yourself to constructive mental models. You will observe mental models which you'd rather not reproduce. These are great to study as well, because it's easier to avoid a thought pattern when you know how to spot it in yourself and others. Constructive or destructive, name your mental models and write them down. What do you think of these mental models? Thanks for watching.